What is going on, everybody? How's it going on this lovely day down here? As some of you know, I'm based down in Austin, Texas, and we just had a really fun, cold couple of days with ice and all that kind of fun stuff that's been wrecking power and everything. So hopefully now that it's warming up, I'll be okay power-wise for the stream today. But so welcome everybody to LUMIX Live. These are the weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, whether they are recorded or done live like this. These are the platforms for all of you to ask us questions, to hopefully learn a couple of things about the cameras that we have, and just have a really good time and hang out and just learn from each other in a kind of cool, fun space. For a little bit of a change on this particular LUMIX Live, I'm trying out YouTube's new Q&A, or at least new to me, Q&A functionality. So if you have a question and you want us to address it during the stream, look at the top pinned comment from LUMIX USA, and you'll see that there is a blue Q&A button. If you click on that, you'll be able to click on there, ask a question, and it drops it into a different kind of display on my side. So we're going to try that, see how it works. If it doesn't work while we're doing this, I'll just switch back to doing it normally in the actual Q&A section that we have down here. Let's try this. Let's see how it works. I'm always looking at ways that I can try to get just an easier way to organize these questions and get everyone's stuff answered as best I can and as many questions as I can. So hopefully it works. I already see a bunch of people asking some questions in here. Supposedly what I'm able to do with this is actually select this question and have it actually show up there. So you can see I copied one of Ulrich's questions from before. That lets me come in here and actually kind of prompt it so y'all know what I'm talking about. So let's kind of see how that works. But before we go into too many of the questions, I want to remind everybody about LUMIX Pro services. Here in the US is what I can speak to. We have the Platinum and the Red tier. Red tier is free if you've recently purchased an S5 Mark II or any LUMIX camera. Make sure to go to that page, get yourself registered for LUMIX Pro Services Red for free. You can follow the QR code on the screen, get yourself registered. All products, Micro Four Thirds, as well as full frame S-Series cameras are included on there for the most part. There may be one or two options here in the US that may not be on that list, but this is a great way to have a service and support system behind your purchase. If you're someone who likes, higher level of service and you want that extra, point for potential out of warranty issues, for faster turnaround and shipping and things like that, take a look at the Platinum tier for LUMIX Pro Service here in the US. The Platinum tier gives you 20% off out of warranty repairs, 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways. You get the extended 3-year manufacturer warranty like you do in Red, but you also get exclusive membership hotline access, so you can speak to a person if you prefer to do that instead of chat, as well as annual sensor cleanings, EVF, and cleanings, as well as a really cool welcome gift for signing up into that platform. So let us see. We've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. I have 2 pre-recorded pieces or little segments just so I can make sure that I kept my train of thought very on point and not distracted by some questions. That's going to be talking about features like focus transition as well as the audio capabilities in the S5 Mark II. But outside of that, we've also got my S5 Mark II hooked up to the camera here, are up to my stream, so we can talk about where things are in the menus, answer some of those questions that you all might have, and kind of go from there. So let us quickly run through the chat part here and see what kinds of questions or comments have been coming up. One that I do want to address right now is from, I think it's Slavo. I think I'm pronouncing your name right. If I'm not, I sincerely apologize if I don't pronounce names correctly. It says, when will I be able to edit RAW format in Lightroom? So for anyone that's working with an S5 Mark II and you're capturing RAW stills, you know that typically, or you've probably seen now, that the RAW format isn't supported yet in Adobe Camera Raw. So that would be Lightroom, Photoshop, Bridge, programs that utilize ACR. Those updates typically come, in my experience working with the company, Those updates typically come anywhere between 30 to 60 days after a product is announced. Sometimes it has taken longer. Sometimes it's come out much sooner than that. So it all depends on when Adobe pushes their next update for ACR. So make sure you're keeping your software updated. If you're running one of the legacy versions of Adobe Lightroom that's not part of Creative Cloud, you probably won't be getting support for the raw files direct in the program. You would have to use their DNG converter. But those are questions that would be for Adobe, not for us. So be sure to take a look at that. Just make sure your software stays up to date. You'll know when you get raw support because you'll get the update that says Camera Raw is being updated. Let us see here. Any of the other commentary before we got in here? Adobe plans, things like that. S5 standard profiles. I want to talk about that a little bit. For those that do want to do some raw photo editing, SilkyPix is the solution right now. Granted, I know a lot of people probably just groaned because SilkyPix is not necessarily one of the best programs out there. If you're used to working with Adobe or, Capture One or On One or any of those other programs, SilkyPix is a much more kind of involved program to work with. It can give you really great results. It's maybe also not the most optimized for modern computers, but that is a solution you have at the moment. Let us see here. Letting us know where people are. Looks like people are loving the S5 Mark II. Yep, so far, I mean, it's been crazy on our side with the S5 Mark II. So we're super excited about it. Can't wait for the S5 Mark II X. Yep, that one's going to be really fun when that thing happens. Let us see here. So the S5 Mark II, basically the full frame equivalent of the GH6. It can do ProRes internal, raw HDMI. Same, but with live streaming. Is that not correct? Kind of. As we get closer to the S5 Mark II X, we're going to talk more about those particular features and what that camera has and how it's different. So, let's see here. Nick Driftwood is here. Awesome. Welcome, Nick. Is this live or recorded? This is live. Hopefully you can tell that now by the answering questions. Let us see. So excited for the S5 Mark II. Hope to order it soon from All Things. Awesome. All right. So let's actually jump into a couple of these questions to see what we've got going on here. So the first question that had come up was from Ulrich before the stream started, which says, how to get from 5 to 12 custom profiles. So one of the things that we have with the, make sure that I had my audio still set up right. Yep. So one of the things that we have in the S5 Mark II is the ability to come in here and change, basically the different custom profiles that you want to work with. So you have everything from, the C1, C2, and C3, which you've got in those modes right there. So you'll see C1, C2, C3. You have, by default, you've got out to C3-3. But you also have the custom mode settings option here, which says how many of those custom modes do you actually want to have visible. So if I come in here to limit number of custom modes, you'll see I can come down here and I can select all the way up to 10, which when I come back and go into save custom modes, this is where you'll see C1, C2, and C3, which are hardware selected. So this is on the actual mode dial. And then C3 includes 1 through 10. So that's how you get to 12 total custom profiles. Now, for anyone that wants to set these things up, you have to actually put your camera in the mode that you want to save into a custom profile. So what that means is if, say, I want to have my camera set up in full manual creative video mode, I want, this color profile, I want so-and-so, you would put the camera in that mode, then you would go actually into this menu, go into the wrench, go to the cog, go to save to custom mode, and then save on one of those particular modes. It'll ask you, do you want to overwrite what's already there? And you also have the option to come in, click display to edit the title, so that when you go into that mode, you know what you had that set up as. So that's how you would save out custom settings into C1 through C3 by default, or C1 through C3-10 if you want to go all the way down into those other options. If you want to access those other options, you would take the camera, you would go all the way to... You would go all the way to the C1 through C3, which I have to just come in here and change my camera to HDMI rec out so you can see my menu. So what you would do is go into C3, which is, I think it's actually on the bottom, you'll see that it's programmed C3-1. Go into the menu. And then up in the C menu here is where you'll see this is where you can pick which of those options you want to be working with. This is why it's pretty useful to actually name them how you want them so that you know which one is which. So hopefully that addressed that question for you. And let me set my camera back, take my microphone off because I don't need that one. Cool. All right, so we're back onto that now. All right, so hopefully that answered your question there. Let's close that. All right, let's go. YouTube's user interface for the Q&A thing is a little not necessarily the best looking, but okay. So the other one says, how do you set... Let's select this question. Let's show this question up. All right, so how to isolate settings between photo and video. So this one's actually pretty straightforward. We've covered this a couple of times. If you want to change the camera up so that it keeps photo and video settings separate across the board, you would go into the camera menu. You would then go to the gear option. So if I click display, it'll tell you this is custom. And then I'm going to come up to the second page of the first image quality options here. And you'll see this option called Creative Video Combined Set. Go to Creative Video Combined Set. And what you'll do is change each of these to the camcorder icon. And now each of these options that you select for camcorder will be isolated out between photography modes and videography modes. Now this is dependent on you actually going into the camera and selecting either PAS or M for photography and the creative video mode for the actual video recording that you want to do on the camera. So you want to make sure that you have those set up right and that you're using the right modes as you change through them to get you that setup for it. All right, let's see here. Next question we had come up here. This one was from Daniel K. It says, animal detect. Does it secretly detect eyes on some cameras, as Richard Wong suggests? So yes, our animal detection mode on the LUMIX system, when we've added animal detection, prioritizes the face, eye, and head of the animal. However, we do not call it animal eye detection for a reason. We are not stating that the camera will 100% always be able to focus right on the animal's eyes every single time. Part of it is our UI that we use is a little bit different than what you see other camera companies doing, where it would actually just be like a box over the eye. We use the full box with a crosshair, so there's a little bit of a difference there. But the system is designed that when it does detect the animal, it is going to prioritize towards the head of that animal and eye when it can. So that's kind of why, like I said, we don't say that our system is animal eye and face detection at the moment. I know that it's something that is being worked on. Whether it's going to come out anytime soon, honestly, I don't know. But it is something that the system does pretty much prioritize. But again, like I said, we are not advertising it. We're not saying that it does that. But if you do look at it and you look at the point that is chosen when you're in post, it does lean towards that area. So hopefully that clears it up for you. Let's see here. Going to jump a couple of questions here. I'll get back to some more of them as we go through. This is one that I want to address. Another question from Daniel says, I saw a videographer call the S5 Mark II a video-centric camera, and he got offended when I suggested it's a proper hybrid camera. That question went away way too fast for me. Said almost nobody buys Lumix for photos. Any idea how true this is? Well, I can tell you that it is patently untrue. There is actually a fairly sizable portion of Lumix users that are photography focused. I think what a lot of people kind of confuse in this sense is that traditionally you would say a photographer and a videographer are two ends of the spectrum. When I worked weddings, the videographers and the photographers never got along. Modern day creators, anybody that's out there creating any kind of content for a client, whether it's online, print, whatever, we're all hybrid shooters now. It's just to what varying level that person is. A lot of people look at the Lumix brand that have been working with the video side of our products forever as, we are a video brand. We've always been, way better known for videography and cinematography under the Lumix brand. But that being said, photography features, we put a lot of time and effort into our photography capabilities on these cameras as well. Though it may not be when you say like, hey, you want a sports camera, is the S5 Mark II necessarily a sports camera? Not really. I know a lot of sports photographers want faster mechanical burst rates, things like that, but that's also why we are not saying that the camera is a top-tier sports photography camera. That's where people, kind of, I think, go back and forth to say, oh, photographers aren't buying the camera. It's like, well, no, photographers actually are buying the camera. There's actually a decent number of photographers that buy the camera. The difference is photographers tend to also not necessarily hang out in forums as much. At least from my past experiences, and talking to a lot of the photographers that I do talk to outside of it. Yes, we do hang on forums, but we're not always, first to jump to a forum, especially on Facebook. A lot of photographers tend to be more, quieter in the community kind of thing. So, at least when it comes to the Lumix brand. So yeah, I would say that it's not true that almost nobody buys the camera for photography. There's actually a very large portion of photographers that do buy the Lumix cameras. They may just not be in the flashy ways that, I think since we are a video community primarily that you see online, most of the Facebook groups and stuff are videography based. So that's why you're not really seeing a lot of photographers there. It's called confirmation bias. So, let's see here. Where did we go here? Is the 1 second timer, time for high res, I gotta get used to doing this. Is the 1 second time, for high res a physical limitation? S5 could do 8 seconds and I was hoping for more. So it's not necessarily it's not a hardware limitation per se. I know that when we go to the S5 Mark II, it's down to a 1 second for this. There's different processing that's being done on the S5 Mark II compared to the original S5 now that we've added the phase hybrid system into this. So there are differences between these. Does that mean that it's always going to be that way? No. Does it mean that it's always going to get updated? Also, not necessarily. But at the moment, you see that that's basically how the system is right now. We are always updating and making our cameras work better and better based on user feedback. So as we get more feedback, and remember, this is the first implementation we've ever done with a phase hybrid system in the camera, it's done to a bigger case where, time and effort is put in to make sure that the core essentials work and that they work as expected. So that's why the system basically kind of it is the way it is. It doesn't mean that it's going to change in the future. So just kind of hang in there a little bit with it. And we'll always provide updates as we get going. Let's see here. This was one that I want to address before we go into the next segment here, which is there a difference in image quality and crop between pixel to pixel and APS-C on the S5 Mark II? Yes, so there is a difference. When you look at pixel to pixel, you are 100% doing literally pixel to pixel. So if you select 4090 or C4K, it's 4096 by 2160. That means that you are literally doing 1 pixel per pixel in that resolution. When you do Super 35, you're downsampling from a slightly larger area. And then when you do full image area, you're downsampling from the full 6K sensor width. So when you talk about image quality differences, The more you downsample an image, the sharper that image can be, because you're taking a larger res and crushing it down into a smaller res and sharpening things up. Noise also can look different between them. However, if you look at the difference between pixel to pixel to Super 35, or APS-C is what we call it in this camera, there's not going to be a huge difference unless you're in something like 1080. If you go into 1080 and you go to pixel, you are really punching in on that sensor because you're using literally 1920 by 1080 of the middle of the sensor. Which means the higher the resolution the sensor, the bigger that actual punch-in is when you're doing it. If you're from the video side, it's windowing. So that's where some of that difference is. APS-C, when you're in something like 1080, is going to give you better quality than when you go pixel to pixel. 4K, not as big of a difference in image quality. And then obviously 6K is pixel to pixel when you're in open gate, because that's full sensor height and width for the recording. So, before I go into any more of the questions, I want to talk about the focus transition functionality that we have in the S5 Mark II, because this is a feature that has been typically held for cameras that you see like an S1H or a GH6. So let's take a look at the recording that I did earlier that shows you what focus transition is and how you use it. So we're taking a look here at my S5 Mark II. And one of the cool features that we have in this camera that's actually a direct carry down from products like the S1H, the GH6, cameras like that, is the ability to utilize the tool called focus transition. Now, focus transition is a mode designed for repeatable focus pulls when you're working with any kind of electronically controlled lens. In this case, I'm using the 35mm f1.8 on my S5 Mark II. Now, the way this works is when you're in the creative video mode, you're just going to click the menu button. You're going to go into the main camera options here, which if I click display, you'll see this is the video options. And then you're going to go to the last sub option here called others. Now, under others, you'll see focus transition. Now, once I click into this, it's going to tell you to set the focus point for the ones that you want to use, so clearly there. And what this allows me to do now is manually focus my lens to varying different points throughout the focus range. So in this case, I now have the lens manually focused to the Sigma 24-70 f2.8L, and I'm going to set this as, basically, let's set this as position 1. So I will click the white balance button, and you'll see you get a little indicator on the distance scale there. But now I want to focus this out, and let's focus on the 35mm boxes I have in the back there. So we will manually focus out here. Let's get ourselves to that 35mm. And then from here, I can set this to my next point. So let's set this to the farthest away point, which would be set 3. So I will press the exposure compensation button, and now we have set point 3 set. So my near and far focus points are set. But I can also come in here, manually focus down, get to my next point, which I'm going to use as the color checker here, or the gray card part of my color checker. And I'm going to set this in the middle as point 2. So why this is a useful feature is for situations where you want to be able to do repeatable focus pulls that even the best of the phase detect hybrid systems can still struggle with, because you have to rely on either tapping or selecting a focus point throughout the frame to tell it, hey, this is where I want my point to go. Being able to do this manually and go in and literally tell it based on the feet distance, this is where I want to go, means that you will always have the exact same result every single time you use it. Now, this system is designed to be actually very straightforward and easy to use. So while I was manually focusing by literally taking the lens and manually rotating the ring to go to my select points, I also have the ability that I can use the joystick and move my focus box where I want it to go, and then just press the AF on button, and that would automatically allow me to manually activate the autofocus for it and have it jump right to that particular mode. So this gives you a lot of control to be able to come in here and say, okay, I'm at my 35, I'm going to bring this back, let's focus on that 24 to 70 again, and then just select your points there. But now, what I would do is click the Set button, and you'll see now I get a different overlay. I have points 1, 2, and 3, the Q menu button, which would exit from this option, and then a display option, which lets me change different various settings. But now to activate each of these, I can either tap on the screen, tap on 1, 2, or 3, and activate the different points, or I can use the joystick, which I'm going to use here. So right now, like we said, we're at point 1, which is the close point. So if I tap the joystick in, nothing happens. You'll see that that's where we're at. But I can also come in here, and if I end that, go back in here. Now, what I can do is actually go from that point 1 all the way out to point 3. So now if I click point 3, you'll see that the focus pulls to all the way out, in this case, very slowly, out to my point 3, which is the 35mm lens boxes in the back. And we can slowly see them coming into focus. And it takes about 15 seconds when you're in this particular option. But say you want to do this faster. I would just click the display button and then go to focus transition speed. Now under focus transition speed, you'll see that you have plenty of options here. You have SL all the way up to SH. By default, the camera will ship with M, which is about a 2-second pull between the two different points that you select. Or you can go to ultra fast. So if I select SH, if I go back, you'll see that we are at position 3 right now. Let's bring this all the way back to position 1. Now it snaps right back to position 1. I can click again, snap to position 3, or I can even go snap to position 2. Each of these options allows you to change out how you want to track your subject. So if you're doing some sort of work where maybe it's scripted and you have your subject is going to make a slow walk towards camera, and you know that that walk from point A to point B is going to take, say, 10 seconds. I can go into something like low and then say, okay, let's go back to the start position at point 1, which is all the way forward at the 24 to 70. And you'll see that that's about 4 seconds for that move. And then I can go all the way out to 3, start sending it down its way to 3, and you'll see that again, it's 4 seconds to move from that point. So this lets you customize that and gives you that repeatable movement every single time. Now, is this something you're going to use day in and day out every single time? No, not really. But being able to have this level of control in an S5 platform now is something that we haven't done until this S5 Mark II. This is a feature that I had said had been always reserved for cameras like the S1H and even into the GH series. So you now have this ultra reliable, higher end tool for your use that just gives you all of that control. You're not having to rely on a focusing system to be able to do this for you, which can work in some scenarios, but as I had said, it's not always going to be as repeatable. You may slightly tap to the left or right of the subject you want. You may not always 100% pick the exact same point when you're doing tap to focus. This lets you have that reliability and the repeatability that you cannot get with an autofocusing system. So that was focus transition. As you can see, after this video is posted, we'll actually timestamp these things. I'm trying to get better at that, so you'll be able to go back and actually take a look at that. But ultimately, the whole point is that focus transition gives you that reliability, and now it is a feature found in the S5 Mark II, and you don't have to necessarily go up to an S1H to get a feature like that. So let's take a look at some of these other questions that were submitted. Again, if you've just joined us and you want to submit a question, you'll see a banner up top that says Q&A. When you click on that blue pinned comment, you'll be able to actually click in there and then submit question or the prompt that comes up. Trying a new system here on YouTube, if it doesn't really work or if it's confusing after this or next week's stream, we may go back to the older way. But yeah, hopefully you've got this kind of, hopefully that helps with some of the questions. But one of the questions I want to answer here is from, I think it's Zeptammer. It says, is it possible for Panasonic to add an option to disable the new detail processing added on the S5 Mark II. So as far as the way processing goes when it comes to imagery, these are things that are going to change through different cameras, different processors, different sensors being used. So as far as whether or not it's something that would change, honestly, I can't answer that yet. I honestly don't know. If anyone's been around with us long enough since the S1H, you know that we did actually make an adjustment to the way the image is processed on the S1H thanks to the community's feedback. Now, whether it is something that affects a small number of users, a large number of users, whether it falls within an image quality specification, those are the reasons why I can't answer, provide you with an answer as to whether or not it's something that's going to change. Something to know, though, is that because the community has been asking for a long time for us to add phase hybrid system into the S platform and the G platform, we've always said from day one that phase systems, so adding phase detect pixels, does alter the image quality compared to what we've done in the past. So there may be certain circumstances where, because we're now listening, we're acting on what the community has asked us for in the broad sense by adding things like phase hybrid autofocusing, there may be some differences that are just inherent because of what happens when you have pixels on the sensor that are now having to be masked out so that they're not being seen in that image. That's not saying that that's how it will always be, but it's just something to keep in mind. When you ask, when certain features are asked for, there are always things that will impact on other areas. Now, again, whether or not this is something that is directly related to that, I honestly don't know. But we will always take that kind of feedback as you are, using these cameras. As more and more people use these cameras, it gives us better and better feedback to start, kind of tweaking. Again, this is also the first implementation we've ever done of phase detect pixels on a sensor with our processing. So there may be some differences that you see with there. So outside of that, hopefully that addresses your question a little bit there. So let's see here. One of the other questions here was about the possibility to add a 3x2 60p anamorphic mode to accompany the 3x2 full frame mode, and or some other 2.5 to 2.8K full frame modes with higher frame rates. So as far as frame rate is related to sensor recording area, these are directly related to vertical resolutions that you have in the sensors. So 3x2 on this sensor and on the hardware is limited to the 30 frames per second readout because of the full, 4,000 pixel height. Depending on the aspect ratio is going to change, the recording area that it's in. Will we do a 3x2 from a Super 35 region? I honestly don't know. 4x3 is still the industry standard when it comes to anamorphic. If you're using anamorphic lenses, yes, there are more lenses coming out that can benefit from 3x2 aspect ratio, but those are lenses that are designed to cover a full sensor area. For the most part, I know I'm very generalizing some of that there, but that's the stuff that as we get this feedback, we take it into account. It may not be an immediate reaction to creating some of those modes, but know that when you do bring it up, it does get talked about. Matt Fraser and I have talked about, what are potentials for other aspect ratios in there. Some of it comes down to either bandwidth, some of it comes down to whether or not it's something that is physically doable on the hardware that's used in the cameras. So, but yeah, as you keep asking them, we'll keep pushing it up the chain. It doesn't mean that we're not listening if you don't hear from us right away, but that is something that we have brought up the chain with us. One of the other questions in here that actually I really definitely want to get to is, where did that question go? Is from Steve here. So the question here was, is there anything from a compatibility side that would help choose between the Sigma 150 to 600 versus the 60 to 600 with the S5 Mark II, thinking about dual IS support or the newer, faster focusing motors? Well, I have some great news for you. I have actually done some tests with the 150 to 600. As you looked at, I think it was 2 streams ago, I showed that one, dual IS works with the Sigma long telephoto lenses. It works in a different way than our traditional dual IS works because of the different stabilization motors and the control that the different lenses do. But we can work with both the body stabilization and the lens stabilization in the 150 to 600. What is great news about this is that the 60 to 600, I actually, Sigma has been awesome, and they are sending me one to actually play around with and do some content on. So we're going to be doing an actual stream on the 60 to 600 after I receive it and get around to playing with it for about a week to actually show what's different with that particular lens. Some of the big things to always kind of keep in mind is that lenses that use different focus motors will give you some different results. The 60 to 600 uses a linear motor, from my understanding, which is going to give you faster focusing solutions when worked with cameras like the S1 or the S5 Mark II, because that has the PDAF solution added into it. That can mean that we can move that lens faster and more direct. So that I personally will be taking a look at it. I'm not a birding photographer or wildlife photographer by any stretch of the imagination. However, I do like focusing on motorsports. So when we get out of this cold snap that we've got down here in Austin, I'm going to go back up and do some testing with the motorcycles going around the corners and stuff. And I will be using that 60 to 600 to play around with it and create some content to be able to answer some of those questions for you. So definitely, if you're not already, get subscribed, follow us. We're going to have more content on that particular kind of lens in the coming weeks. Let's see here. On the G9, there's this one was from Red Frame. On the G9, there's focus peaking high and low. Any chance that could come to the GH6? The GH6 does have high and low. It's just labeled differently. High and low was a very generalized standard for focus peaking to say, do you want it to be ultra precise or ultra visible? Those are going to be two different things that you see with all focus peaking solutions. On the GH6 and subsequent cameras after that, you're actually going to see now a +2, -2. That's going to give you the same effect. +2 means it's going to be more precise, which means it's going to be harder to see on larger pixel or higher resolution displays because it's actually giving you a more precise readout. -2 is going to give you a less accurate view, but more visible view because it's going to use more pixels to show you the area that you're in focus. So hopefully that answers that question there, Red Frame. Let's see here. I like this question to bring up. It says, will we ever see any LUMIX native dedicated cine lenses? This one is probably not. If you're thinking cine lenses as fully manual focus, geared out lenses, things like that. One of the cool things with the L-Mount Alliance is that Sigma is a part of that, and Sigma makes some pretty awesome cine versions of their lenses that are basically their photo lenses rehoused and recoded for cinema applications. Will you see it from us? Probably not so much, but the L-Mount Alliance and the Micro Four Thirds platform have a plethora of lenses available that will fit that particular use case for optics. Let's see here. This one I want to address really quickly. Will there be Blackmagic RAW support with the paid firmware upgrade like the S5 and the S1H? Really would like to use with my Blackmagic Video Assist and Resolve. Not a fan of ProRes, RAW, or Final Cut. At this point, I can't confirm anything on that other than we are looking at it deploying other RAW over HDMI solutions. As of right now, I can 100% confirm Apple ProRes into the Ninja 5 Plus. As far as Blackmagic RAW goes, I honestly don't have an update for everybody other than we are looking at other RAW platforms. As we get closer to when the RAW support is added for the S5 Mark II, which is going to be closer to the S5 Mark II X shipment dates, we'll have more information, but we will definitely keep you guys updated as we get more information. So at the moment, I don't have an update for you in that particular case. Let's see here. I want to address one thing that's being asked in the chat here, and that is as far as the way the focusing system works. I have very limited information on this at the moment, so I'm just going to clear up two things that I've seen lots of back and forth online about, asking how does the thing work. So when you are in full HD and you are in 60 frames per second utilizing the full sensor area, right now the system goes to the contrast DFD. From day one, we've been saying this, the system is intelligent. It's a hybrid system, so it will use the best method within those particular parameters. So full sensor area, so full sensor width, full HD 60p or 50p uses contrast DFD. When you change it to APS-C, it's using PDAF, and all of the other full HD options from 24 and 30p, 25p, those all use PDAF. That's the only information I have at the moment as far as details, but it is something I'm looking into, so hopefully that addresses a little bit of the question right now. I know there's going to be a lot of people that want more answers than that. That's all I've got for you at this moment. Let's see here. One of the other questions that came up here, it's not in the Q&A, but it's in the chat. Let me just go back to see where it was about using the camera in adverse conditions. How say, and this one came from, I think it's Vladislav. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name wrong or correct. Wow. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so I apologize. Like I said before, if I don't pronounce a name correctly, I apologize. It's not malicious. I'm horrible at reading names. How safe is the camera for usage in dust, sand, and rain conditions? The S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X, by extension, are perfectly fine to use in moderate rain and adverse conditions. The cameras are weather resistant. When we design our cameras. Even though the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X have an active cooling solution, that cooling solution in the plenum are separate from the internals in the camera. For one, if they weren't, the camera wouldn't be light tight. Cameras have to be light tight because you can't have stray light hitting the sensor. So that's on one point. On two, we have a lot of experience building cameras and other products as Panasonic that can be weather resistant, or in some cases, like if you go to our laptop division, totally weatherproof. We have a lot of experience building products that can withstand the elements. The S5 Mark II is able to withstand it. I would not really be that concerned with it. You can't submerge the cameras. We do not IP rate the camera, so you can't submerge the camera. Do not do that. If you do that, that's on you. But yeah, if you take the camera out, like it's been raining and icy and stuff down here in Austin, and I've taken my camera out and it's perfectly fine. There's a lot of people, we've had GH cameras, we've had an S1H camera go out into some pretty severely challenging situations, and they've been perfectly fine. The biggest thing with any kind of adverse weather condition that you bring a camera into, whether it's dust, sand, water, whatever it is you want to make sure that you have a good process for maintaining your equipment after you've exposed them to those environments. Things to remember, like salt water is horrible for cameras. You never want to get a camera, and I apologize if you hear chainsaws outside. They're chopping up the trees that fell over the last couple of days, so I apologize. Where was I? Yeah, so as far as weather resistance, make sure that if you ever bring your camera into, say, like, down by the beach or something like that, where it's salt water, you want to make sure that you are actually maintaining your equipment. Salt water is the arch enemy of electronics. Even fully weather resistant, weather sealed cameras can still have negative effects because of salt water. Anyone that does diving or anything like that, y'all know how that kind of system works, especially when you're maintaining housings. It's the same logic for a camera. Let us see here. Sacred says, how am I supposed to clean the sensor if I can't give it a bath? Yeah. Do not submerge your cameras or anything like that. The other thing I want to reference here, Andy, I did get your email. I apologize that I have not responded to it yet. I got a little sidetracked with some other stuff going on, and in the office and stuff. But I will address it. I'll try to get to it later today or tomorrow morning. I sincerely do apologize that I did not get back to your email yet. Okay. Before we jump into more questions, I want to actually show one of the other kind of lesser known features with the S5 Mark II, and that actually has to do with audio and how we handle audio on the Mark II now. So I recorded a little segment here. Let's jump and listen to what I have to say about audio on the S5 Mark II. Okay, so one of the other kind of really cool things that we've added with the S5 Mark II is the ability to change some of the audio tools that you use in the particular camera. And a lot of this has come down from our deployment of 4-channel audio in cameras like the GH6. So this actually becomes very easy to access with our camera because we have direct audio controls when you're looking at, what kind of microphones do you have attached into this, or what kind of levels you're working with. And one of the first ones that I want to talk about here is the sound rec level display. So right now you have some different kind of cool tools that you can use when you have the camera set for, kind of showing you the levels, right? So if I come in here and say I turn rec level limiter on, which is going to change the way the microphone may sound a little bit here, I can come in here, go into the menu, go to sound rec level display, and then go to set now. Now, what's cool about this is that in some cases, you don't want necessarily an overly, kind of filled in display that you have for your meters, right? So if I have press out, you'll see that we have the meters down on the bottom left. They're relatively large. When you're looking at it out over an HDMI display, these are a little bit smaller than they are on the actual camera, but you'll see what I mean as I change these. So right now we're in the normal way that this has always looked. So if I go back into the menu, go to sound level display, go to set, you'll see that I also now have an option here to change this to small. So now when I come back, you'll see that the actual meters are smaller. So they take up less real estate on the display, but you also have a little bit of a less amount of information on it because the display is smaller. So when you're working with an external monitor, this is great because I can come in here, go to set, change this to large, and I actually now have my particular decibel readings visible on this meter when I'm looking at, an external monitor for display. If I'm using this for, say, focus checking or client monitor, stuff like that. But if I'm working on camera and I want to keep these nice and kind of small and simple, I just need them to reference to make sure I'm not clipping. I can come in here, change them to small, and I get a much smaller, cleaner looking display, but the trade-off being that I don't have my actual decibel points visible for channel 1 and channel 2. But now also, when it comes to the audio levels on the S5 Mark II, we've added a couple of extra tools here. So you have mute sound input, which means it would literally just mute the microphone inputs on this camera. So you're going to have super clean, just video footage, no audio recorded. We have different gain levels now, so we have standard and low. We also have the sound rec level adjust, which lets me go down to negative 18 decibels, and then also down into mute if I wanted to use that. And then we also have sound rec quality. Now, since I'm recording this audio with a set of Rode Wireless Go 2 microphones, I have the ability through the 3.5 millimeter jack now to record 96 kilohertz 24-bit audio, or by default, 48 kilohertz 24-bit audio. So you can now not have to necessarily buy the XLR1 audio to get higher resolution sound. We also have that sound rec limiter as well as wind cut, and then we also have the mic socket control for whether or not you've got plug-in power microphones, standard microphones that are going to be externally powered, and then you also have your direct line in. So you have a lot of control when it comes to the microphones that you want to use on the S5 Mark II. Then we go down into that second page, you'll see this is where if you're using something like the DMW MS2, which would be one of our very old microphones that we used to sell, This allows you to go in there and select some of the custom functionality that that microphone had, but not all of them now that we're in a different audio system. And then when you select and you have, say, the XLR1 audio adapter on, this is where you can do 4-channel microphone input. You have your XLR audio settings in here, and then also your monitoring setups. So this is where you can say, I want to monitor both channel 1 and channel 2 when I'm listening through headphones on the camera. I can listen to all 4 channels, or I can split out each one of those 4 channels and kind of just select which ones I want to hear. Even down into saying, I want to hear just channel 1 and channel 1 plus channel 2, channel 3 plus channel 4, and so on and so forth. So we've really given a lot of control for how audio is controlled on this particular camera. Even to the point that if I press and hold one of my custom function buttons, I can come in here, go to my audio selection, and actually program in the audio information menu that we first released on the GH6. While it's not a dedicated button out of the box in the S5 Mark II, you can still program this to one of your buttons to have direct drop-in access to the main settings for your audio. So, yes, the S5 Mark II, one of the lesser known capabilities is that we did port the entire audio solution that we've built in from the GH6 into the new camera, so you've got all of those capabilities. And it makes a really cool solution for anyone that's recording multiple different, kind of styles of audio. We've just expanded it even further, and then that cool new audio interface that we have on the GH6 does exist in this camera, though, like I said, since we don't have a dedicated button like we do on the GH6, you just have to map it to one of your custom function buttons, which, as I showed in that display there, if you just press and hold like a direction on the rear pad or any of the buttons that can be programmed, you can drop right in and program whatever you want to them. There will be certain things that you can't program, depending on what options you're using. It just kind of depends. Like Operation Lock, which is the mode that allows you to lock out the different settings on the camera, that has a bit of a limited option of what options you can actually, or which FN buttons you can select on it. So for those that don't know, you have an option in the camera, and I'm doing this live, so I may forget exactly which menu it's on because we do have a lot of things in here. We have Operation Lock set up for this camera that allows you to come in here and say, I want the cursor, joystick, touchscreen, dial, display button, or some combination of these options here to be locked out when you enable Operation Lock. And the way you do this is a couple different ways. For one, I can go to FN button set, go to setting in rec mode, and then this will give you an actual kind of display of the camera. And I can go through and say, hey, okay, I want to change, say, the front FN2 button, right? I want to change the FN2 button to be my selection for the Operation Lock. So if I click on this, I will scroll down through this menu to where I can select Operation Lock, which again, I apologize if it takes me a second or two to find it. It's been a while since I've actually selected this mode here, but you see, really this is kind of just showing you how many different things you can actually set on this camera. But I will come through here. Let's go down. It's not going to be in audio. It's going to be in one of these settings here, right there. So Operation Lock. Now what it means is when I press that front FN button, it'll tell me Operation Lock. And if I try to rotate any of the dials on the camera that I've selected, those are now locked out from changing. So, some of the things that I want to address here, a couple more questions while we got a little bit more time on the stream here, is right here. It says, I hopelessly fell in love with the Mark II, so I quizzed my deep relationship with the Mark I, but the older one gets ready faster. Could you make the startup time faster? Thanks. So, one of the things, what this question's being asked about is the startup time on the S5 Mark II. The S5 Mark II, from a total battery out of the camera or camera being turned off for a long period of time, has a slightly longer startup time than the Mark I. And this is actually this is twofold. So for one, it is a totally new processor. This is the L2 engine. It's a new sensor, new internals. compared to what the previous one was using. But also, this is a kind of way that the camera is also mitigating and minimizing standby power or off power loss. Any camera that you have where you plug in the put a battery in and turn it off, you'll typically have different power states when it's off. Think of like laptops. You can turn a laptop off by closing the lid, but you're still going to sip power for different kind of core components. As the camera sits longer and longer, it goes into a lower power state, which means that if you leave your camera on the shelf for a longer period of time, your battery is going to be much closer to full charge if you left it on the shelf at full charge. The new system does boot up just a little bit slower than the others, but after that initial first turn on, the camera boots up pretty much just as fast as the previous ones. So typically what I recommend for this is power the camera on first thing in the morning, like if you're going to get out and go ready to shoot. And then if you have to turn the camera off and turn it back on, it's going to boot up really, really quick. Or just use the power saving options that the camera has, where it will go to sleep after a certain amount of time, and it goes into a sleep mode at that point. So different ways that you can manage this. All cameras are going to be slightly different. Some cameras prioritize ultra fast turn on, which means they don't go into as low of a sleep state or an off state. It's a little bit of a difference between the way different cameras operate. Let's see here. This one I want to tackle here. This one comes from, I think it's Flix. It says, I have a feature request that would be really cool. Could you add a function to the LUMIX smartphone app that lets you connect/use your smartphone as a live view via USB instead of Wi-Fi? And luckily that you asked that question, because after cameras, I believe it was the GH5 Mark II, the GH6, and now the S5 Mark II, the LUMIX Sync app does allow you to connect it direct over cable. So I can take a short USB cable like I've got here that came with my SanDisk ProBlade drive. I can take this cable, plug it into my Android device and right into the camera, select tethering, and then when I open the LUMIX Sync app, it's going to use this connection instead of Wi-Fi to be able to operate things, to transfer photos, to work with the control panel, things like that. So you do have an option for it. It's just not on every one of the cameras. But there's also not, if you're looking for literally just I want to use video out from it, that isn't something that we have at the moment, but it is something we can bring up. Let's see here. Sacred asks actually a very good question here. Not that I'm surprised by that. You always do ask some pretty good questions. It says here, can you use the Rode mic, the Rode Bluetooth mics with this camera? If not, it would be nice for live streaming like on the GH5 Mark II or the X. So this is a question that we actually get often, which is, why don't cameras support Bluetooth audio? And across the board, the vast majority of cameras probably won't ever support Bluetooth direct audio for the most part. And I say for the most part because I have a feeling that there's maybe one camera out there that does do Bluetooth audio, but it would be a very proprietary thing. And typically the reason for this is that Bluetooth has latency. Bluetooth actually has some pretty severe latency depending on the Bluetooth modules that you're using or the controllers that you're using. There are things like Qualcomm's aptX and aptX low latency, which are designed for things like these Corsair headphones that I have that I use on my computer. Those rely on things like Qualcomm chips to be able to do things like aptX low latency. Cameras don't use those kinds of processors. Typically, the processing is done by bespoke processors that are designed for the camera. In our case, on the S5 Mark II, it's the L2 engine. So because of that, Bluetooth audio is something that is always being looked into. It's just you have to overcome the latency challenge there. And whether or not the headphones that you want to use or the microphone that you want to use are able to actually communicate on that particular spec or whatever's being used. So at the moment, devices like this Rode Wireless Mic Go 2 that, shout out to Rode for sending me these. Full transparency, Rode sent me a set of these. That's why I use them now. And they are awesome microphones. I would have bought them myself. when you want to do things like live streaming on the X when we have that camera out, or like a GH5 Mark II, just plug this into the 3.5 and it's going to do exactly what you need it to. That audio will pump through and you will be able to stream with that audio. So the Bluetooth would be cool. It's just not a necessary thing at this point. And that goes the same for Bluetooth audio monitoring. Bluetooth audio monitoring, if people have challenges with focus pulling and stuff when it comes to HDMI latency, audio latency would be another thing that people, I think, would have a lot of challenges with, because you've got, long latency when it comes to that. So just kind of keep that in mind when it comes to Bluetooth. It's a cool thing, and I know a lot of companies are looking towards it. I know we are looking to see if there's ways that we could do it in the architecture that cameras typically operate on. So let us see. Lots of comments and questions going back and forth. I see one question came from Phil, which I'll put up here. It says, it'd be great if we can get auto black balance on the S5 Mark II in a future firmware update. Also, 1080i output when recording 60, like the S1H. So, here is where some of the things that I think you have to look at, what camera you're asking for this on. This is a $2,000 camera. Things like auto black balance, 1080i, the 1080 interlaced options, things like that. You'll find those typically on much more video-centric cameras. The S5 Mark II is a hybrid camera. It is designed for varying levels of users. So someone who is looking to supplement their pro equipment and want a more compact, lighter camera that has close to the same features, and people that are just getting into this that want an incredibly high-performing camera but don't want to break the bank on it. Some of that stuff you're going to see as, relegated to the higher end models where it's more applicable to be in those cameras. So as far as an S5 Mark II, you probably won't see those kinds of things in an S5 Mark II. Auto black balance, the timecode jam sync, stuff like that. It's a category of camera. These are hybrid mirrorless cameras that are designed to fit both photographers and videographers. This is not a cinema camera or a higher end video production camera. For those cases, go with an S1H, go with a BGH1 or a BS1H or a GH6 if you really need some of those kinds of features. Let's see here. Where did we go? Select question. So this one says, could you please bring back the PAL NTSC menu? To film in 24p, I have to shut down the system and I can't integrate the 24p on my custom buttons. With the S5, I could have at least 2398 on a C button. So some of this is regionalization differences. When you go to different kinds of cameras, you can either have NTSC PAL 24Hz switch. The challenge with a true 24p, although actually I think you're referencing 2398, depending on the camera and the regions, that's where you run into some of those challenges. The cameras, to properly do it, there's ways you would set the camera up. Either the way some cameras used to be, you would be able to just change it right in the frame rate options to go 25 to 50. But when you make that change, there'd be a longer delay between when the camera does it because it would be resetting the clock rate of the system. The way we choose to do it is to set it up where you actually go into the menu, change it, and then it resets the entire system frequency. That's kind of just how it is. We can bring up to the engineers, see if it's something that they would consider changing. I highly doubt they'll consider changing it because that's just the way the camera is designed to work. And that's more in line with like our S1H and the way we've traditionally done it. So I think the S5 was a bit of a outlier in the way that worked. It also depended on the S5. It also depended on where you bought the camera. If you bought the camera in the US, you had to hard switch between NTSC PAL and the 24Hz options. Although the S5 didn't have 24Hz options. Let us see here. Pete says, I think what the Lumix team did for KC Camera Conspiracies was one of the best personal touches I've seen from a manufacturer. Forever a Pony of Hope fan. Yes, Casey was a lot of fun to have a conversation with, and yeah, I think these days, being able to laugh at yourself a bit, especially when it comes to the camera. I know Matt and I, when we had the conversations with Casey to bring him up to speed on the camera and coordinate shipping it out to him, conversations like that, Matt and I just have fun with. Doing press briefings, doing media briefings, all that kind of stuff, give you guys a little bit of a peek behind the veil. At least for the channels and the people that Matt and I are responsible for working with. They're fun. There's no reason why they should ever be, this kind of like, wall between people. We're, as you guys can see, or everyone that's joining the chat, y'all know that we'd like to be as personable and as open as we can with everybody. That does not always mean that everyone gets the answers that they want on these streams. We can never always, answer everything that you ask us. But that's what needs to happen these days. People need to. A brand is as good as we are when we speak to everybody, and I speak to a top tier YouTuber the same way that I would speak to all of us here. The person that's just getting started to someone who's been doing this seasoned for decades. I'm gonna talk to everybody the same way. Matt's the same way as well. But yeah, connecting with Casey on that was actually a lot of fun, and that conversation was a lot of fun too, and I'm glad some people saw the humor in it. So yeah, super fun. Let's see here, a couple more questions. Exploring Norway asks a question here. He says, or Exploring Norway says, is the DMW MS2 still a good option? It's a good question. If you can find one of those microphones, it's definitely an option. Is it the best option these days? Not necessarily. I like that microphone. I know a lot of people really do like that microphone. The reason why I say not necessarily is it depends on what you need out of a microphone. The MS2 is a solid choice. We've been making it for years. I believe it still is a current microphone, though they are relatively harder to find these days. But yeah, like I use, again, I get it. It's Rode. They sent me the microphones, but I've always been a bit more of a person that leans towards Rode and some Sennheiser products. Like I have the AVX system from Samsung, from Sennheiser as well. There are just so many choices these days for audio solutions that, truthfully, I don't think you can really go wrong with any of them. The MS2 has some additional functionality with our different cameras. If you're on an older Venus engine, so the prior processors that we used, you can get some pretty cool features when you use something like an MS2. On the modern cameras, so like a GH6, and then now on the S5 Mark II with the L2 engine, some of those features don't carry over, like being able to select, wide shotgun, short shotgun, narrow, stereo, all that kind of stuff. So I would just take a look at what you need out of a microphone. The MS2 can be a great option if you can pick one up. Usually you can get them for relatively inexpensive. And they're direct interface into the cameras, where some of the other microphones like this Rode that I have here, they're just different. Some people, audiophiles will tell you everything about a microphone that makes it better than another one. That is definitely not the level that I am at when it comes to audio. I use what I like. So, let's see here. I got time for one more question today. And let's see here. Martin, actually, maybe I'm already on a blacklist, as Sean did not go to any of my questions yet. Nope, you're definitely not on a blacklist, Martin. I've got your question about the destination card slot stuff. I don't really have an update for you. I know that got asked. But it's one of those things that has to get fed up and then brought through that whole channel, as far as if something like that would ever change. The question, the comment that Martin is bringing up here is about how destination slots work on cameras like the GH6 or now into an S5 Mark II, and being able to change data rates and stuff like that. This is a great example of, the question is something that I'm taking in. I'm not necessarily going to be able to give you an answer. I can acknowledge that, yes, you've sent the question in and I've got it, and I by no means am I blacklisting anybody. That's not how that works. I just don't always have the option to be able to get you an answer yet for it. So it is being passed up to see, if it's something that can be done. Changes like that, which are a very major change, have to have a lot of things into consideration as to whether or not it's something we can deploy, and not have a whole huge nightmare of a change to the system. Yeah, cool. All right, so outside of this, I want to basically just ask everybody, how did the Q&A thing work? Like I said, this is a totally different way of doing Q&A. I can already see Daniel, you prefer asking questions in chat. Not only others can see it and chime in, but it feels much more transparent. That is a very true point. I think this was an interesting way to... interesting thing to try. Clearly going through this, it's actually a lot more work on my side. I thought it would be a lot easier. So we're going to go back to doing the, probably just the questions in the chat using the, tag at Lumix. So thank you all for indulging me in at least trying it. Anytime there's something new, like a tech-wise or a feature-wise on some of these things, I like to at least try it, because sometimes, it can evolve and it can be a much better, setup. So yeah. So, let us see here. Chat helps if you want to have the community help answer. You like chat? Yeah. I think this will be an experiment that I've tried. We can say that I've tried it, and then we'll go back to the other one there. Flick says, I had the impression that you had a better overview of the questions. Yeah, using the Q&A session makes it a little bit easier for me to actually follow through with the questions because they're in a separate window. But yeah, we'll have to kind of keep kind of playing around through this. Daniel, it's a shame you can't combine the question highlights with the question from the chat. Yeah, there are other programs I think I can use. I was on the stream with Caleb Hoover a couple weeks ago, and he was using Restream for that. Restream lets you highlight questions in while through the chat. So maybe I'll look at possibly doing something like Restream for this and using their platform for it. As of right now, I use Streamlabs to do this, so not always the best, pretty straightforward to work with, but yeah, that's kind of one of the things, is we always want to evolve this. I'm always looking at how we can work with all of you better, how I can address questions better for all of you. I know that I can't always get, and I don't always get to everyone's questions, and I really sincerely hope that if I don't get to your questions, y'all think that I'm ignoring you or something like that. That is definitely not the case. My whole, purpose is to help the community. That is why I'm here. I just do feel bad every time that I, can't always get to everyone's questions. Yeah. Outside of that, I think Nick had asked another question here, which I'm going to actually address because I love talking about this. Nick says, what's your favorite motorbike? For those in the US, my motorcycle. I am actually very, my biggest preference right now is the Honda series of the Rebels. I have a Honda Rebel 500. I would love to have a Rebel 1100. However, the insurance rates here in the United States are atrocious once you go over a liter. So yeah, we'll end it on that one. Outside of that, everybody, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you liked this stream, if you liked the content, if you just like this community, consider giving us a like on this video. Share it to people out there that you think would find interest in these streams and want to get questions asked and answered on the stream. As I said, I know I can't get to everybody's questions, but all of you providing the questions, even if it's something that we can't address on the stream, having it written down in the chat. The chat is always replayed on here. Dropping it in the comments after these videos are posted all helps us refine and build new products for all of you. That has always been the core of this brand, and I am so super excited that you all have been tuning in for this and just actually being part of this community. So I know it's getting a little sappy there, but outside of that, everybody, again, thank you all so much. We will be live again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Next week's stream, I'm coordinating with Matt Fraser right now because I want to have Matt on that stream. We're going to be talking about not live view composite. We're going to be talking about real-time LUT. There is so much about real-time LUT that both photographers and videographers are keying in on. And yeah, we want to have a really fun conversation about that. So yeah, definitely join us for that. If you don't already, subscribe to the channel, get notifications set so that you know when we're going live. If you want to see any of the backlog of the Lumix lives that we have, there's over 150 or 160 of them at this point. Be sure to check the links down in the description. And with that, have an awesome day, have an awesome weekend. Be creative, share with us all the things that y'all create with the S5 Mark II and whatever other Lumix camera you have. By tagging us on social media, you can tag at Lumix USA over on Instagram. If you're someone who loves TikTok, go check us out, Lumix USA over on TikTok. We've got some fun, interesting things over there, a little bit more lighthearted, some tech info there. But other than that, Lumix Live next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I will see you all there. Yeah, that's the longest outro ever, so peace.